How was Saul described in 1 Samuel 9? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 1 Samuel on Walking Through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing 1 Samuel chapter 9, verses 1 to 6. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 1 Samuel chapter 9, beginning at verse 1. There was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son of Becharath, the son of Aphiah, a Benjamite, a mighty man of power. And he had a choice and handsome son whose name was Saul. There was not a more handsome person than he among the children of Israel. From his shoulders upward he was taller than any of the people. Now the donkeys of Kish, Saul's father, were lost. And Kish said to his son Saul, "Please take one of the servants with you, and arise, go and look for the donkeys." So he passed through the mountains of Ephraim and through the land of Shalisha, but they did not find them. Then they passed through the land of Shalem, and they were not there. Then he passed through the land of the Benjamites, but they did not find them. When they had come to the land of Zuph, Saul said to his servant who was come with him, "Come, let us return, lest my father cease caring about the donkeys and become worried about us." And he said to him, "Look now, there is in this city a man of God, and he is an honorable man. All that he says surely comes to pass. So let us go there. Perhaps he can show us the way that we should go." In chapter 8, Israel has demanded a king. The impetus for doing so was because of the corruption of Samuel's sons, but in reality their demand was a rejection of God as their king. For if it was simply about corruption, they could have demanded that Samuel deal with his sons, or demand that God deal with Samuel's sons. Israel had looked around at the other nations, saw that they had a king, saw what that king meant to those nations, and so wanted to be like them. God warned Israel what a king would mean for them, but Israel was insistent. And so God would give them a king. But as their king, God was going to select that man, a process we will see in this chapter. In verse 1 of chapter 9, we meet a man named Saul. We find out that Saul was of the tribe of Benjamin. Saul's father's name was Kish. When it comes to the genealogies of the tribe of Benjamin, tracing them back to Benjamin is quite a difficult task because different names are given in different places. Now, why might this be? Recall back to Judges 20 and 21 of the sins of the people of the tribe of Benjamin that caused the tribe to almost go extinct, save for 600 men. These men took wives from those who came to Shiloh, meaning that there was a lot of intermingling of the tribes with the tribe of Benjamin, something that would not have necessarily been the case had Benjamin not completely been destroyed. So, when you read the genealogies of Benjamin found in Genesis, Numbers, and 1 Chronicles, you're going to find great difficulty in sorting them out. But it appears that Saul could be traced all the way back to Becher, the second in the list of the sons of Benjamin found in Genesis 46, verse 21. Whatever is the case, Saul was of the tribe of Benjamin, just as the Saul found in the New Testament, who became known as Paul, was of the tribe of Benjamin. Aphiah, the last name mentioned in 1 Samuel 9, verse 1, was a mighty man of power, showing us that Saul came from a pretty affluent house. Saul himself was described as handsome, in fact, more handsome than anyone in Israel. From his shoulders upward, he was also taller than any of the people. How tall is not told to us, but he was noticeably taller than others among the people. That means in a crowd, Saul would stand out. Now, why would the writer of 1 Samuel make note of Saul's appearance? Well, not only was it true, but when you think of a king, you think of someone who would fit the part. Someone who was muscular, had a commanding presence, was easy on the eyes. We tend to afford such people respect, even if they don't deserve it, something a king would need, especially the first king of Israel. Later on in the book, David is not going to fit this type of description, and neither will Jesus in his day. And in truth, one of the reasons that Jesus was rejected is that not only didn't he act like the king they were expecting, he didn't look like the king that they were expecting either. Saul, though, would physically look like a person who could be a king, something that we need to keep in mind. What was Saul doing when we first meet him? He was going out with one of his father's servants to find donkeys that had been lost. Even though Saul is going to be described as a young man, he is not a child or even a teenager, for we will read of his son Jonathan as being able to be in the army quite early in Saul's reign. The time period that we are in, though, families lived in the same area and were expected to help each other, hence the reason Saul, as a grown man, was sent out to search for these donkeys. We're not told where Saul and the servant began looking, but from other scriptures we find that Gibeah in Benjamin is referred to as Saul's home, so we can assume that they started there. They would travel through the mountains of Ephraim, which we noted in 1 Samuel chapter 1 would also be found in the territory of Benjamin. A passable route that they took and the land covered is on the screen now. But because Benjamin was so mountainous, Saul and the servant couldn't find the donkeys. They had taken so long, which we're later told is 3 days, that Saul turned to the servant and said for them to return to Gibeah, lest his father stop caring about the donkeys and begin to be worried about them. It's not that Saul didn't care about the donkeys, but he cared for his father more, that he didn't want to worry him. At the very least, returning to Gibeah meant that they could receive further instructions from Kish. However, the servant said that they were in the land of Zuph, in the city of the man of God. Recall from chapter 1 that in the lineage of Elkanah was a man named Zuph, and that Elkanah lived in a place called Ramathaim Zophim. From chapter 2, we learned that this city must also go by the name of Ramah, for Elkanah is said to return there from sacrificing to the Lord in Shiloh. So who is this man of God? It must be Samuel, who still lived there according to chapter 7. The reason for visiting the man of God was because everything Samuel said came to pass, so perhaps he could show them the way to go to find the donkeys. That Samuel is described as an honorable man shows us that despite his children being corrupt, Samuel was not. He was a good man who walked right in the sight of God. We'll continue this story, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 1 Samuel chapter 9, verses 7 to 14, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.